All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone. This is a webinar. It's going to be about 30 minutes. Hopefully we get everything fitted in here into a 30-minute window. I know we're in the middle of everyone's day, so I wanted to make sure that I'm respectful of everyone's time. And I appreciate everyone who was able to take the time. If you're listening to me while you're doing the dishes, you just got your phone in your pocket, or if you're listening to me on a run or whatever you're doing, I just thank you for taking the time. And I hope to share some bits and pieces here about Social Security that are going to be impactful, especially for those who are right around Social Security age, so the 62 to 70 range. This presentation is going to be tailored toward folks who are close to Social Security age, and it's going to be heavily based in understanding the fundamentals of Social Security timing, and we'll go over some of the strategies there as well. But as far as questions and answers, feel free to throw them into the chat. I will have a Q&A session at the end to address anyone's questions, but if you could just throw your questions into the chat, and then at the end, I'll review all the questions and answer anything. And if we run out of time, I'll send an email out to all the people who've attended or registered, and you'll get some answers to those questions as well. All right. Without further ado, timing, Social Security, planning for the max. Let's get started here. First and foremost, just some general disclosures. This is, of course, educational webinar. I am a financial planner, but this is not advice. This is just general education for everyone around Social Security. So if you don't have a financial advisor, please meet with one before implementing any of the strategies that we talk about here today. Or if you do have an advisor, make sure you speak with them, and we'll take it from there at the end. We'll explain a little bit more. All right, so a little bit about myself. If you're a client of mine and you're tuning in, you obviously know me, but for those who are meeting me for the first time or maybe attended one of my sessions before, that's a little bit about my background. I'm a certified financial planner. That is one of the designations in finance that encompasses a lot of retirement and investments and taxes and estate planning, and you name it. It encompasses a lot that happens for people with large families or people with businesses. Those are the two segments of people I work with. And you can see there, I founded this company in the money retirement, which I currently run as a solo practice. But I've had 12 years experience working at a bunch of firms across the country. Some I'm sure you're familiar with. But what today is about sharing you with my experience, what I've seen in terms of Social Security timing and some of the pitfalls and some of the strategies that I've seen work out for people. I'll be basing a lot of this on my over a decade of experience working with families and people who are getting close to retirement, and sharing as much knowledge as I have here. All right. My promise to you is you're going to walk away understanding three big decisions when it comes to retirement planning in terms of Social Security. We're going to talk about the impact of Social Security timing because it is lifelong. We'll talk about the life expectancy factor and what contributes to that. And then finally, we'll talk about different strategies, maybe delaying Social Security or not, and what that does for you. First and foremost, Social Security on the surface is it's a huge annuity, essentially, that was made by the government. The United States Congress created Social Security as a way so that people who are in their late 60s or retirees were not going to go through what happened in the Great Depression and in some of the worst times in the U.S. history, where you had a bunch of retirees and they were going broke. They didn't have enough savings in hand. So the government created Social Security to try to solve this problem. So when people talk about Social Security, you have to keep in mind that we're paying into it every year. You have Social Security tax that is going into it. You are contributing to it every single year if you have a job or where you contribute to, which most people do. But the big things that we want to take away here is that usually delaying your Social Security is going to increase your benefits, as we'll talk about more. We'll also talk about how taking it early would reduce your benefits, and we'll talk about the accelerated schedule there in terms of when you're retiring early. And then we'll also talk about this break-even point and what that is. So if you've just heard break-even point when it comes to Social Security, it is essentially the point in time where the benefits of taking your Social Security benefits early is equal to taking it late. So there's an age, which is your break-even point, where We'll talk about where that is for most people and how we get to that number. But I just want you to keep in mind that break even point is that point where if you're taking it early, you're getting money now, but as you live longer and longer, those benefits for delaying are going to start to outweigh those from taking it earlier. So just keep that in mind as we come back to this throughout the presentation. Okay, so the break-even point. Someone who claims early retirement will be getting benefits for several years before someone who delays, right? But if you look on the right-hand side of that bullet point, a calculation using 2026 numbers for Social Security, someone who is delaying to full retirement age versus taking it at 62 is skipping out on $178,000. This is based on the average monthly benefit. Now, that's a lot of money. If you take it early at 62, $178,000 in your pocket sounds great, right? We can see how that's enticing. Now, the other option, or going the other direction, is someone delaying all the way to age 70, which is the latest that you can claim Social Security unless you're working. Someone who delays up to 70, as opposed to taking age 72, is skipping out on $285,000, over $250,000 that someone would be giving up essentially for those 8 years had they pulled at 62 as opposed to waiting to 70. But the thing we want to keep in mind here is that to make up those numbers, right? Let's say the first number is 178,000 between 62 and full retirement age. If you delay up to a full retirement age, you've got to make up now that $178,000 since you delayed. And how long will it take you to make up that amount? When you look at a break-even point, that's where we get that number. What age do you make up for missing out on taking it those first 8 or first 5 years or so? In this example, the benefit comes out to around age 80 for the first example, and then delaying from age 70 extends it an extra year. Your break-even point comes out to 81. What that means is for someone to delay, it had to make sense for them to delay if they expect to live past their break-even point of 80 or 81 in either of these examples. All right. And if anyone has any questions on the break-even point a little bit more, throw it in the chat and I'll answer at the end. But this is a very important point when we start looking at what your break-even point is and what any given situation could throw at you. The break-even point is that end-all be-all number that you want to keep in mind. Now, when we look at taking it early, taking it at full retirement age, or taking it late, the benefits are going to vary. You could take it as early as 62, but one thing I want you to keep in mind here is it's an accelerated schedule where that drop off in monthly premiums or monthly income from Social Security is accelerated from 62 to 65. So you see a bigger drop off in that monthly income if you take it at 62 to 65 versus taking it at 65 to 67. You don't see as much of a drop off taking it early at 65 as when you're accelerating those at 62, 63, 64, you see a much bigger drop off. And so you can see this in the numbers here, down here in this chart. We're looking at all recipients age 65. Their monthly benefit is as of last year from the Social Security Administration. Average monthly benefits was $1,600 for someone who took it at 65. It was $2,016 for someone who took it at full retirement age. And then if we had thrown in there age 62, you would see a bigger drop off than the gap between 65 and 67. If you are looking at taking it early, determining whether you take it at 62 or 65 is going to be a significant difference, even when you're just talking about taking it early. But keep this in mind as we kind of circle back this again as well, because it's important in terms of people who want to take it early. And I'll explain some of those situations at the end. Okay, here we go. Life expectancy. The old saying in Social Security planning is, if you can tell me when you're going to die, I'll tell you when to take Social Security. As simple as that. If we all knew when we were going to die, it would make Social Security planning the easiest planning in the world. Because all you have to know is, okay, is my age that I'll pass away greater than my break-even point? Yes or no? But no one knows that, right? That's the whole beauty about life, right? We don't know. But that gives complexity to this. And so when we start doing our planning, just overall planning that we're going to live longer than we typically expect is going to be giving you a lot more room in terms of your planning. If you plan to live longer and you pass early, at least you pass with money, at least you pass with income or resources to live off of. Whereas if you plan for earlier and you then live much longer, you're going to hit into the situations where you spent all your money as if you're going to pass at 80, but you actually are here at 95 or 100. And that can cause significant problems because you could run out of money. According to Social Security Administration, someone who's born in the 1960s, so I'm talking about those baby boomers right now, who reaches retirement age is expected to live to their mid-80s on average. And so if you're a baby boomer listening in right now, it's someone who expecting to live to the mid-80s and retires in their mid-60s, that's 20 years. And that could be more than 20 years if you live longer than that. So when we're planning for this, we want to make sure that the right decision is made with Social Security, because that's almost a third of your life where you're collecting off of this, and you need to be sure that your decision is going to pay off for a third of your life. That's a big decision. All right. If you're applying to Works with me, or if you're just someone who's come and visited me or met with me, you probably are in this bucket that we'll talk about. And what's happening here is there was a study done by Brookings on the impact of people's income and their life expectancy. And this may be something you already thought was happening, but essentially, people with higher income live longer, or the correlation between income and longevity are correlated. And so what you'll see here on the right-hand side is this chart, and on the red, you'll see women. In the blue, you'll see men. And now these are numbers from way back when, I know, but the numbers still ring true today. But what you'll see here is in the red, when you look at income, top 10% on that right category, that means the top 10% earners in the country back then in those two decades, 1920s and 1940s, have you lived 6 years longer if you were a 10% earner in the country, in the top 10% for women. So you just add 6 years of life just because of your income if you're in the top 10%. Now for men, you see the same thing, but even bigger a difference. If you're a top 10% earner in the country, in the United States, back in these two decades, you added 9 years to your life by being in the top percent of earners in the country. So if you had to fast forward this and do this with today's generation, where we are today, if you were looking at a top 10% earner and you're wondering, am I a top 10% earner? Am I in that bucket? If you have a household income of over 250,000, or if you're an individual and you make over 155,000, in today's dollars, you are in the top 10%. So you would fall into one of these categories where you're likely going to live, if you're a woman, 6 years longer than most. And then for men, you're likely to live 9 years longer than most. So keep that in mind when you're doing your planning. I know a lot of people think that they're going to pass early, but if you fall into this category where find yourself in the higher income brackets, you may find yourself living much longer than most folks. And that average life expectancy that you hear about may not suffice for you. You may have to extend that out, and quite a bit, possibly. All right. Reasons to delay Social Security. If you're like some of my clients or some of the folks that I've met with who enjoy working and they have their identity tied to work and they're not ready to retire, a lot of times they just want to continue working or doing part-time or something, some semi-retirement. And if we're doing that, then delaying Social Security is obviously a great choice, because what you're going to see here is you get an increase every year that you delay past full retirement age. And you avoid getting those decreases before full retirement age if you take it early. If you're delaying, you also get to save for retirement more. If you're in your early 60s or mid 60s and you can continue to work, that means more income, that means more savings, and means more logs in the fire there in your retirement fire that you have going. And for those who are looking to also keep their company healthcare, maybe they've taken a look at some of the healthcare premiums recently, especially with what's happened with the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And for those of you, you know what I'm talking about, it can be very expensive if you're an early retiree and then using your own healthcare, or as opposed to your company's healthcare once you leave the company. So these are big considerations that consistently come up in terms of Social Security and for those who want to delay. Now, for those who want to retire early, I'm talking about those folks who are eager to get out of the workforce and hit the beach and go hit their cruises and do their trips and whatever they have planned. For retiring early, catching up with family has been a big one. People want to spend time with their family. I've never met someone who's regretted spending time with their family, right? It's usually the opposite. People at the end are looking back and see, my biggest regret, I didn't spend enough time with the family, or I didn't do more stuff that I love to do, or I didn't follow my passion and what I was passionate with later on in life, whatever it was. And then finally, travel, and that's a big one in retirement, especially if you're looking at your whole life. Doing traveling in your 80s is tough. You may be in a wheelchair, who knows, right? You may have health issues at that time. Traveling earlier while you're healthy is something that you can't get back. You can't get back time. That's another big reason for retiring early, and this would also impact your Social Security timing. Now, if we're looking at today's numbers in 2026, the advantage of delaying, you'll see here, these are the maximum benefit numbers on the right. So if you retired early at 62 and your income was, you were hitting the max to contribute to Social Security each year, you'd have close to $3,000 a month. If you delay up to 67, you've added $1,100 a month. And then if you delay up to 70, you've now added quite a bit. You're over $5,100 now a month if you delay until 70. And for a lot of folks, that can cover basic living expenses by itself. When we're looking at Social Security and delaying, you can see the huge difference that can happen to your monthly benefits. And of course, as the years go on, these numbers will change and adjust and increase with inflation. But when you delay, you are past full retirement age. You are getting an 8% increase each year, and you are also getting a cost of living adjustment. Don't forget about that. You get 2 increases every year you delay past full retirement age, the COLA, and you get the 8%. And there's not a lot of guarantees in the government, but the only guarantee that you truly get is that you will get an 8% increase in your Social Security benefit past full retirement age. So if you're a person who likes guarantees, that's another reason for delaying. Okay. Delaying Social Security requires you to live off some money in the meantime, right? Unless you have endless buckets of money to pull from, you're likely going to start pulling from the specific bucket called the tax-deferred buckets. These are your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, traditional IRAs, rollover IRAs. All of that is pre-tax and falls into your tax-deferred bucket. The advantage of doing that and using this bucket first is it will decrease your required minimum distributions at age 72 to 75, depending on your age. And those required minimum distributions oftentimes are what kick people up into much higher tax brackets later on in life. So using those tax deferred buckets of money upfront, if you're delaying Social Security, is going to cut down on those RMDs later on in life. Now, the drawback to that is you're drawing down on your portfolio. So you are drawing down on your 401k and IRA earlier than had you just taken Social Security early. I'll give you 3 examples here, and then I'll finish off with 5 situations where it makes sense to pull early. It may make sense to pull early. So here we go. First here, we got early, 62. He's got 800,000 saved for retirement. He doesn't have quite enough as that he wanted for retirement. And so what happened was he decided he's going to start to pull Social Security benefits early at 62. Now, by doing that, he reduced his Social Security benefits by 30% for the rest of his life. And what that did was cause him to have to pull more from his retirement. And what did that do? It lowered the inheritance that would eventually be passed on to his kids. In this example, just using these rough estimates, he left $50,000 for an inheritance. That's just for example's sake. Okay. Now we look at full Fred and Flora. They're age 66. Now in this example, full retirement age was 66, but now it's 67, closer to 67 for most folks. In any event, they had a little bit more saved up, so they felt pretty comfortable. And they decided to start pulling at full retirement age. So they're going to get their full Social Security benefit. And what that'll do is just increase that inheritance a little bit more. They have a little bit more that they're passing on. Now, late Linda was unfortunately lost her husband. She's now a widow, but she received a bunch of life insurance proceeds, and she has $2 million saved up for retirement now because she delayed and she was saving more. She had more time to save. So now she's got a huge bucket of money for retirement. She had life insurance proceeds, and she delayed till 70. She's got the much higher Social Security benefits. And now what does that do? It's allowed her to continue growing her portfolio throughout the rest of her life, pulling much smaller percentage off of her portfolio. And what does that do? It is leaving a huge or much bigger inheritance than the other two examples. So when we look at pulling here, the biggest thing is the effect on the inheritance. And if inheritance is not a big deal, pulling early, in this example, early Earl paid off. But if leaving inheritance was more of a goal, then doing something like full Fred and Flora or even late Linda just increases the inheritance amount. How much do you love the kids or the beneficiaries? That'll help answer the question of Social Security. Okay, before we end off here, just 5 situations where pulling early may make sense. I have an article on this. If you'd like it, just email me and I'll send it over to you. It's on my website as well. But number 1, if you are expected to have a short life expectancy, obviously pulling early would pay off in that situation, depending on how urgent that health crisis is. Number 2, if you are trying to qualify for certain benefits, there's a child benefit with Social Security. There is also spousal benefits. If you are a spouse, you cannot claim spousal benefits until your working spouse actually starts to claim. That's a very important point and something that people sometimes forget. If you are the spouse trying to take spousal benefits, you have to have your working spouse claim first. In some rare situations, if someone wants to claim spousal, then they may ask their spouse, the working spouse, to start pulling early so that they can start pulling early. Okay. Other situations, you may simply just need the money. If you need Social Security to live off of, so you don't kill your retirement savings, yeah, that may be a situation. Another one is you may want to continue growing the portfolio, right? We talked about pulling from that tax-deferred money to lower their RMDs, but you're also lowering your portfolio value. So some people, if they're disciplined enough, they can do a strategy where they pull early, but they invest the money. So they take it early, but they don't spend it. They invest it elsewhere. And if they invest it elsewhere, if the stock market's going up, or whatever it is they're invested in, if it's going up 8-10% a year, whatever it is, they may make up some of that difference from taking it early. But the issue with that is we see government money coming in, we may spend it versus investing it. And we're just humans, right? Human habit, human nature. If we are that type, it may be better to take it early. Okay, finally, the last example there where pulling early makes sense is if there's a huge age gap between the spouses. If there is a large age gap, pulling early is going to likely be a situation that you'd want to look at. Why? Because you get a step up in your Social Security to the working spouse or the higher benefit once they pass away. So something to think about as well if you do have a wide age gap if you're a couple. All right. That's everything I've got here. I'm going to leave it open for Q&A here. And okay, we've got a question here. I'm 63 and I started collecting Social Security. I've heard discussions of the monthly payment being reduced when the trust fund runs out in 2032. Also consideration of reducing payment to high net worth or income individual and limit payments to $50K a year. Where are the changes of this happening and should I start collecting now to remove the risk for future lower benefits? Okay, yes. Thank you, Brian. So this is a very common question and, no one knows the answer as to what will happen when the trust fund runs out. Right now, it is expected to decrease, like you're saying. We are going to see reductions. Right now, it's projected to be around 20%. But The whole understanding with Social Security is that Social Security is part of the mandatory part of the budget. In order for Social Security to be reduced or completely gotten rid of, there has to be major legislation passed by both parties in Congress. But we know how difficult it is right now with all the gridlock in Congress. Think about what's going to happen here in the midterms. It is likely power is going, as it always does, move away from the president, and we're going to see even more gridlock. And it's going to be even more difficult to pass anything. And if that's the case, and we continue to see the amount of gridlock we've had for years, and this continues, it is going to be so unlikely that Congress comes together, they hold hands, they come together, and they say, you know what? We have now decided we're going to work together and create this massive legislation that is going to satisfy both parties, and we're going to get rid of Social Security and come up with something else, and or some version of that. And ask yourself, Brian, how likely it is that the Democrats and Republicans are going to get together and quickly come up with this large bill that will change things overnight and completely uproot everything. And if you feel that it's very likely, I would look at, let's see what happens here with how Congress comes up, how the makeup comes up after midterms and for fall and all the way up to 2033, because there's no president that can come in and just cut Social Security. It's illegal for them to do that. It would have to be Congress passing a bill that goes through the House, it goes through the Senate, and then gets passed by the president. And it's going to take so much cooperation, so much time, so much effort from both parties that it's highly unlikely it doesn't happen. In my opinion, what I think happens, and what most likely happens, is that they just cut something out of the budget, they cut something else, whatever it is, or they increase taxes. Those are the two things they can do. That's the only way the government makes money, is by raising taxes. And the only thing they can do to save money is cut something out of the budget. So right now, if things progress like this, I'd likely see one of those two options pan out. The option of them completely cutting it or letting things get reduced goes against everything that politicians stand for. What is a politician's main job? A politician's main job is to get reelected. And I don't know any politician that will get reelected if they let seniors go. We see poverty rates for seniors skyrocket after they do something like this. I don't know how many of them will get reelected after that. It's basically political suicide. So if they're trying to get reelected, which every politician is, they're going to try and avoid situations like that would increase senior rate poverty for retirees. Yeah, I can't give advice on what I think you should do unless you're a client, but those are my considerations of what I think will generally happen. And yeah, so without giving advice, that's what I think will likely happen. And that's what the landscape looks like right now. All right, let's see here if there's any other Q&A. All right, yeah, that's it for now. So I'll cut the webinar here and let everyone get back to their day. And I appreciate everyone making it out. And if you are around and you got time next month, hop on to my next webinar and we'll do some more talking about some more retirement. All right, thank you. Have a good one, and I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.